Welcome, everybody. It's great to be on the call. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Steve Petty, and I'm president of the Warrensville Heights Area Chamber of Commerce. And I want to thank all of our sponsors. You can see their little logos on the screen. Really, without them, we couldn't go on as a Chamber of Commerce. You all know that, for all the events that we used to do and the events that I'm sure we'll be doing again soon. Moving right along, I suppose that after the last few months, or at least I consider myself pretty fortunate that I'm in business, and I'm open. And because you guys are on the call, the same thing for all of you. I'm going to jump into some statistics according to a June 3rd report by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that most small businesses report being at least partially open. 79% of small businesses are either fully open, 41%, or partially open, 38%. 1 in 5 are closed, either temporarily, 19%, or permanently, 1%. So whether you believe those numbers or that or if it makes sense in our particular area, I'm sure those are national numbers. Critical to the success of reopening is keeping our customers and employees safe and well. Otherwise, all of this is rather pointless. I think you would agree. I want to thank Jerome Duvall, the Executive Safety Advisor and Director of Community and Economic Development, the City of Warrensville Heights, for assembling today's very relevant and still timely presentation. Jerome, I'm just going to turn it right over to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So as Steve said, my name is Jerome Duvall, Executive Safety Advisor and Director of Community and Economic Development for the City of Warrensville Heights. Typically, when we're dealing with a pandemic or a crisis, you usually know where you are in that life cycle, right? From preparedness to response to recovery to mitigation. This particular pandemic is unprecedented, right? We are now dealing with preparedness. At the same time, we're dealing with response as we try to recover and mitigate, all in the same effort. And so this makes this particular pandemic very, very unique. And so we don't have all of the answers, but what we do is that collectively, sharing lessons learned and best practices, which you'll hear from our presenters today, as well as some of our other partners, will help us start to brainstorm and identify not only 6 steps, many different steps to safely reopening your business. But we want you to make sure that you at least walk away with 6 known steps that we feel that from the case study you're about to hear about is specifically addresses how to safely open your business, because we are currently living in it as we speak, right? And so we've had new terms like coronavirus, community spread, droplet transmission, asymptomatic, super spread, distancing, social isolation, PPE, herd immunity, also flattening the curve. And one more, business resiliency planning. All of these terms have become known to us. And so today what I'd like to do is talk about what we know. This pandemic has disproportionately impacted small, minority, and women-owned businesses. Today, our goal is to take a common sense approach based on science to learn how we can safely resume our business and find answers to some of the commonly known questions. And most of you are probably grappling with these questions as we speak. Should be mandatory. Why do daily assessments? Why is it important to reduce your workforce capacity? How to create physical distance in the workplace? Should COVID-19 testing be allowed? How does contact tracing fits into testing. And what do we do if an employee becomes sick? We will address all of these questions today. I'd like to start by introducing our first presenter, Nicole McKinney-Johnson, who is our Director of Human Service with the City of Warrensville Heights. Nicole, under the leadership of Mayor Saylor, has really led the way and has assembled an executive safety team that has worked to policies and procedures. And so, Nicole, turn it over to you at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerome. Thank you first to the Chamber and Jerome for this invitation. Thank you very much. So to your point, Jerome, those definitions and things were very new to all of us. And as we were learning, we had to understand that this was imperative to start the ball rolling as soon as possible. So with the leadership and support of Mayor Saylor, Chief of Staff Kelly Wilson, and our Law Director Teresa Beasley and her staff, our approach was intentional. It was point specific, and the communication had to be imperative, that our employees felt safe during every phase of what we call now as a pandemic. All the while, continuing to monitor and adhere to the policies and recommendations from a federal, state, county, and local level. Also, we had to keep in mind during this time is that the City Hall services were never closed. Our buildings may have been closed to the public, but we had to maintain through our police, our fire, our building services, finance, human resources, our council. City Hall had to remain available to the people. But how could we make that as safe as possible while being closed to the public for a time being? So next slide, please. So the event and communication timeline, understanding the emphasis on communicating early and often was our mantra. Mayor Saylor, again, with his leadership, understood that things had to stop immediately. So on March 5th, he advised a travel ban for all of staff. There were staff, including myself and Jerome, who had seminars and out-of-town travel that was imperative to our work. However, understanding the severity of it, he banned that. And then in March 6th, he decided, and we decided as a team, to start thinking about the COVID-19 preventative measures. So identifying the symptoms, which were early signs. What do we need to adhere to? We immediately developed infectious disease control policy, where it outlined things that you had to take heed of personally if you were to approach coming to work or staying home if you were having cold-like symptoms. Again, all of this information, we were getting it at real time, so we were learning as we were going, but maintaining, communicating at all times. The month of March was really designated to policies, communication, phone calls, as we all were listening to Governor DeWine and his direction and how closing down the state and different buildings, we had to make sure that we were in line and in step with that as well. So the month of March, again, was designated to policy. So again, we did the infectious disease control to all of our employees. We immediately started purchasing and distributing all of our cleaning supplies, masks, our hand sanitizers, our wipes, wiping down our areas, making sure that we were in a safe environment. We also wanted to keep in the forefront, to our next presenter, the usages and services of Cleveland Clinic as it relates to our EAP services, knowing that there were some uncertainties and anxieties and things of that nature, and there's some questions. Our EAP system really came in and provided us resources and links so that during this time we could, find some comfort during this pandemic. So if it was anything from health and wellness to meditation, things like that, as we're going through and trying to figure this all out. The end of March, at the latter end of March, we then decided what staff would be considered essential, what staff would have to come to work on a daily basis, and what staff could be then deemed telecommuting. And that is when we came up with our short-term telecommuting agreement. That was to those that it was advantageous for them to work from home but still be productive on a daily basis. Some of us did Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. Some of our staff, also in our building and service department, were on alternating shifts because we had to start to think about social distancing and not sharing the same vehicles when going on jobs and doing, service work and things of that nature. So all of those components, we had to keep that in mind. So once that was established, we then identified those certain employees, and then that's when the telecommuting started. Then in April, that's when the official policies and procedures started to roll out. That's when we came up with the COVID-19 exposure form. That's when, from a federal and state level, is when the leave, FMLA sick leave policy and all the contingencies and allowances that would do, that came into effect. Next slide, please. We also, in April, talked about our phase 1 and how we were going to reopen City Hall and all of our public buildings, making sure, again, that we're following policy and procedure. We really wanted to make sure that our employees were versed, they were empowered, they were knowledgeable, and that they felt that they could come to us. Because as we all know, our phones, are readily available, and we were getting information from all over, whether it was valid or invalid. So we had to kind of decipher what we needed to make sure that we communicated to our employees and get that information out, fast and efficient, and also leaving room, for error and correction and, accountability. So that was key for us too. So we had weekly leadership meetings with the mayor, our directors, our support staff, making sure that everyone was on the same page. We created policies as it relates to face coverings. We have 2 types of face coverings for our employees. We have the cloth face covering, and then we have the shields for our service and building department personnel and our first responders. And I must say our first responders were very progressive and in the forefront. I mean, they were doing their PPE gear and wearing their face shields and taking their daily temperatures even before the City Hall employees started doing it. Our police and fire were really proactive in making sure that their staff, our chiefs, were making sure that their staffs were okay and they were well and they were taken care of as it relates to what they had to do for serving our public. Then we had a directors meeting via Zoom with all of our directors, and we rolled out our policies, and we talked about, in specifics, what these things entailed, how important it was. If anyone in their staff had any questions or concerns, it was an open door policy. We talked about how we were rolling out temperature checks in all of our departments. Upon entering the building, there was signage stating if you had certain symptoms, you were not to enter the building, you were to return to your car and give us a call and let us know you weren't coming in. And the reason for that, this is still going on. It's a daily practice that we are doing, and the staff is being very supportive and adhering to the necessary precautions that we have to take. We then rolled out in last month, how we're going to reopen our buildings. All of our buildings are open except our Civic and Senior Center, because that had not been advisable by our governor to do so. However, our buildings are open to the public. We are adhering to our social distancing. Let me back up a little bit too. When we first started talking about our staff returning. We wanted to make sure that our distancings were in place. We had to literally move some desks and some cubicles to make sure that that was adhered to. We also provided the plastic shields in our buildings where the public would be coming in, which would be our service and our building department. We already have a glass shield in our city hall for our front desk personnel. So we wanted to make sure that when someone came in, because we understand that our city is for our constituents and our residents, and we wanted to make sure that they were comfortable. We also provided the throwaway mask or face guards or shields, if you will, to make sure that upon entry into the city hall or any public building, these things would be accessible to them. When it relates to our employees, when we did our daily temperature checks, we have the gloves and the sanitizer. We wipe down the thermometer on a daily usage of each employee. So all of these steps, and sometimes, it may seem minute, but it is imperative that we adhere to those type of things. Again, we were distributing all of our PPE gear, our cleaning supplies to all of our staff. We had them sign, the policies for the COVID-19, making sure that they wore their face mask, having time off. We understand that there's the, emergency FMLA leave. We went over all of that and all of the allowances for you to be able to do that. So every day we were learning, we were growing, we were implementing, we were making sure that it was coming to pass. And then, our mayor, with his leadership and vision, he knew that there would be some uncertainty of our employees coming back to work. And, maybe there was some reassurance if we provided the antibody testing at no cost to them. And that's what he did. He partnered with Sterling Pathology, and on our Zoom call to our staff prior to them coming back to work, he introduced that and he let them know that he understood, he heard, and he offered that to our employees on June 11th. And to that, we had over 66, 67 employees take the test, and they received their results, within a week. And, we are really blessed as a municipality. We haven't had any employees fall up under, uncertainties and COVID-19, but we have to make sure that we continue our best practices, keep the communication, keep the information fluid and current, and, just have an open door policy and knowing that we are still learning. Nothing is etched in stone. However, we have to have a baseline, and I believe we're doing a great job.
Thank you, Nicole. That was a very comprehensive case study. I know you covered a lot, and so I'm sure that there are questions that people may have based on some of the information that you've shared. So for anyone on the call, we do have a chat feed. And so if you have any specific questions, please go ahead and send those comments in to us. We are going to hold off on comments until the last presenter. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Kristine Adams. Kristine Adams is the ACNO. I'm not sure what that means. Kristine will explain. Of Care Management and Ambulatory Services at Cleveland Clinic. Kristine?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, first of all, thank you to the City of Warrensville Heights and to the Chamber for having me here today. I'm delighted to be here. We've certainly all been through an odyssey together. I think where I will start is from our President and CEO's perspective, Tom Mihalovic. One of the questions we most frequently get is how long is this going to go on for, and how do we need to look at this from a long-term perspective? And our current state right now, we are going to need to continue in this vigilance unless and until we get a vaccine not only do we, when we get the vaccine, but we also have to be able to administer it to the population at large. So many of you may have heard Anthony Fauci this morning on the news. Dr. Fauci said he's hoping that we will have a vaccine approved by the end of 2020, maybe early 2021. That's just step one. We, in talking with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, Novartis, Johnson & Johnson, and all the pharmaceutical companies, it would require all of them in manufacturing and in supply chain to be able to manufacture and distribute and then inject an entire global population of people. So irregardless of when the vaccine becomes available, you also have distribution factors, plus syringe availability, glass vial availability. There are so many things that would have to fall into place. So conservatively, from a vaccine perspective, we're looking at fall of 2021 on a good day that we would be able to have that available to us. The second thing, which might actually happen sooner, is some type of herd immunity. And so that would be this rolls through the population, and we all develop antibodies to it. However, that requires another thing that we don't have reliability yet, and that is the ability for antibody testing. So coronavirus or COVID is something that is actually very ubiquitous in our population. It is essentially a common cold. And so many of us, if we were tested for antibodies to coronavirus, we would have those antibodies. What is specific and concerning is that COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, is very different. And those are not antibodies that we are able to separate out yet. So we don't know. And irregardless of what you may hear from CVS or Rite Aid or Facebook or Twitter, or even sometimes our federal government, we don't have yet that capability to sort out the COVID SARS-2 antibody. So we don't know what the prevalence is in our communities yet. So we need to look at this as this is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. So with that, I'll have you go to the next slide. I don't have a lot of slides today. What I mostly want you to take away from this is that my slides are here to refer back to and have many useful resources that you can reference to. But as we look forward into the foreseeable future that this is what our life is going to be like, there's three things as whether you're opening your business or you're opening City Hall or you're opening any public services, there's three things you need to remember. And that is screening, cleaning, and distance in betweening. And I am a poet too, so this is what helps people remember. If you can look at every policy that you put into place through the lens of these three, screening, cleaning, and distance in betweening, you will have a lot of success in keeping your public and your employees and your folks safe. I can say this because much like what Nicole expressed was that we were never had the opportunity to shut down. We still had OR cases that we had to deal with. We still had people coming into our emergency departments. We needed to keep all operations going. And commending Nicole and her team and Mayor Sellers on their very, very proactive approach at a very early time, and realizing that action needed to be taken. Cleveland Clinic, just by virtue of who we are, and we also have some very smart infectious disease folks on staff who really also got quickly involved. So when we look at screening as step one, and first of all, I think that's what's important. When you see this model on your screen, each of one of these things looks like Swiss cheese. So it is not any one thing that is going to protect the public or ourselves. It is the layering of the Swiss cheese. It's the bundling of all of these things that are going to protect us. So when we look at screening, policies in the workplace such as don't come to work if you're sick is huge. And I'll tell you a story. We fortunately know that this works because we have not had one caregiver at the Cleveland Clinic in Northeast Ohio test positive for COVID-19 that was traced back to a patient. However, we did have an entire hospice nurse group test positive. There were 12 of them, and it was because we had a new employee. And of course, as any new employee feels, they don't want to miss their first day of work. And so she came to work not feeling well after having been at a birthday party that prior weekend. There was an event held, a teaching event that was held. There was 12 other hospice nurses at that event. And so she came to work not wanting to, not appear to be a good employee. Well, unfortunately, she was in fact infected with COVID. And then all 12 of those nurses did test positive subsequently after that class. And everybody was quarantined for 2 weeks. So you can imagine the impact that had on our ability to take care of hospice patients. So really that screening, if you don't feel well, and on the next slide, which you don't need to move to yet, I have the CDC symptom tracker link there. It is going to be very hard to tell as we move into the fall. We're going to see back the colds, the flu. But what is coronavirus and how does that look different and where do I need to be concerned? There is a link there, CDC symptom tracker. It will walk any one of us through, any one of the public through like what the risk is that what you're experiencing is actually COVID-19. So screening people as they come in, this is temperature screening, simply asking the question, are you feeling well today? Is another just good way to show that like I care about how you're feeling, and if you're not feeling well, you need to let us know, and that's okay. So screening is one huge element in this layer of Swiss cheese. Cleaning, as was indicated by Nicole, we have a list, and again, I provided this link to you on the EPA-approved cleaning and disinfectants, and having all your employees and having all your patrons and having the public just keeping their areas clean is going to take us 1,000 miles as it relates to the transmission of this disease. It's actually a very wimpy virus. It does not survive long on surfaces, and if we continue to clean, we will actually be able to really make headway on this. And this is also thinking about things like doorknobs, light switches. Many places, and rightfully so in their places of employment, are getting rid of that communal coffee pot and having people maybe bring in their own Keurig or something that they single use into their office. Also thinking about like using personal laptops versus public computer stations, those kinds of things, to start thinking about what is it you're able to keep clean and what is it that you should have people use in a single-use manner. If you are not able to find the EPA-approved disinfectants, and I can tell you that sometimes, from a supply chain perspective, they get hard to find, all you need to do is mix 1/3 cup of bleach into 1 gallon of water, and that meets the EPA requirements for spraying and cleaning. I've used that in my own home. I would be cautious around your upholstery or anything that could be actually bleached out, although it is a fairly dilute solution and seems to be okay. But the other thing you could use if you cannot get your hands on it is an isopropyl alcohol solution. You need a 60% alcohol solution, and that's another stopgap measure should you not be able to do that. So screening, cleaning, and then the last piece of this is the distance in betweening. And this is where we get into the cloth masks and the 6 feet of distance. So if you can imagine, I'm wearing a mask and you're wearing a mask and we're 6 feet apart and everything around us has been, cleaned, and I'm feeling well and you're feeling well. All of that put together really makes for a very safe environment. The likelihood of there being any asymptomatic transmission at that point is very, very low. So not only as you come to work, but as you go about your daily life, whether it's grocery shopping, or going to the library, we never really thought before about how close the person was standing next to us, or if they had a mask on. And if they're coughing, are they covering their cough, and are they washing their hands? All of these things now we need to keep in the back of our mind as we move about our daily lives, because as I indicated before, there really is not any end to this in the foreseeable future. This is just going to have to be our new normal for now. And then, of course, the last piece of Swiss cheese is falls under cleaning, but it's really about good hand washing, 20 seconds, soap and water, or you can use a hand and sanitizer as well. All of these pieces that are being put into place, and if everybody consistently uses them, we see very low transmission rates. I'll tell you another story. Our family health centers have infusion clinics, 2 different days, 2 separate cases. We had patients come in to our clinic to receive an infusion. So that's where the nurse really does have to get close, start an IV, and give a medication over a period of several hours. And the nurse asked the patient, "Are you feeling well today?" And they did a thermoscan, and that was okay. The nurse was wearing a mask. The patient was wearing a mask. The nurse keeps her environment clean. Everybody did hand washing upon entering the building. Later that day, the patient calls the clinic, and this, again, 2 separate incidences, very similar stories. The patients called later that day saying they were not feeling well, thinking it was a result of the drugs that they had received in the infusion clinic. But out of an abundance of caution, these patients were sent for COVID testing, and both of them turned up positive. But I'm pleased to say, so obviously their exposure happened prior to entering our clinic, but I'm pleased to say that not any other patients that were in clinic that day, nor our nurses, did test positive even after that exposure. And it was because all of these pieces of the puzzle are followed. So in Ohio, we are seeing a really good response to flattening the curve. Ohioans have done an outstanding job. Our colleagues in Florida would not tell you the same story. They are struggling mightily. Their ICU beds are dissipating, and they are really having a hard time getting this under control. So if you imagine, Northeast Ohio has a whole lot of healthcare providers as employees. So we get this, and I think we do this very well, and I think it's proven to be effective. So going to the next slide, I'm just going to show you for reference guidelines to disinfecting. You can see the website there. So in case you're not sure if what you have is actually EPA approved, this will certainly give that to you. If you use something that has a hydrogen peroxide base, or you want to use some type of aerosolization, which is a little more expensive if you want to go to that expense, there is a sit factor where these, and it's listed in here, if you use them, you have to make sure they sit on the surface before they're cleaned off. And that guideline will guide you to that. The symptom tracker, as I indicated, the CDC has an algorithm that it will walk you through. One of the very interesting and specific symptoms that we hear from our patients, and one patient described it to me like, everything I tasted, it tasted like ash. It tasted like ash was the word. And that word I've heard more than once. So there's something that alters in the smell and taste, which is a very sort of differential as it relates to, is this the flu, or could I be dealing with something else? The other thing that's important to notice too, and one of the most confounding things about this disease, is that some people, most people, 99% of the population will manage this well. 1% of the population gets very, very sick. Usually it's between days 5 and 7 after symptoms first appear. And they almost like get better for a day, and then they get really bad. And that's the danger zone. So we educate patients once they turn positive. They are contacted by our health department. There is a contact tracing that occurs at that time, and then they're given very specific guidelines of when they need to reach out and how to quarantine. There's a printable guide to all of this. I have for you, again, a link. Print them out, hand them out. The CDC is a great resource for this. And then the next slide, please. And then this is our Cleveland Clinic hotline. You can visit this website. You can also call this number, or you can ask questions at that email address at ccf.org. We update this regularly as things change, both with what we know with the virus as to what's happening with our guidelines. So with that, I will pause, and then I'll kick it back over to Jerome, who probably wants to open it up at some point for questions.
Thank you, Kristine. So I want to thank Nicole for giving us a great use case. Kristine, as a subject matter expert, Kristine, you have to tell us what the ACNO stands for.
Sorry, Associate Chief Nursing Officer.
All right. I knew it was a fancy title because it was an acronym. So thank you. I'm excited to also share today that we have other thought leaders on hand and joining the conversation. We have Lamont Mackley, the Chief Inclusion Officer with Outreach, with Jumpstart. We have Christopher Smith, who's the Senior Deal Flow Manager from Jumpstart. We have Shashonna Duckworth, who's the Director of the Urban League of Greater Cleveland. We also have Jennifer Kuzma, who's the Executive Director of the Northeast Ohio First Suburbs Development Council. And last but not least, we have Michael Carter, who is Executive Director of the YMCA here in the city of Warrensville Heights. So we have tried to assemble a talented team to be able to have a roundtable discussion. And today, that's what this is. We want this to be interactive and engaging. And so, next slide, please. This is the portion of the discussion where we open it up for Q&A. We've had a group of individuals who have registered, most of them businesses, who have sent in some questions. Next slide. So what I would like to do now is I would like to go through and read the questions on this slide. And then I want to open it up to our other thought leaders and partners who have joined us on this call today to see if these questions were not already answered. You can give some perspective about what you have gone through and some of the lessons learned and best practices from your experience opening up your business. So the first question comes from Cafe Avalon. Our space is small and we feel we cannot manage social distancing. Any suggestions? So at this time, let's go ahead and open it up for some of our other thought leaders on the call. Who would like to take this question?
I will comment on that question. One of the things we did at the Y, we looked at our different areas. We used a formula that said that there's one person for every 100 square feet. And with that, we were able to show social distance. Based on that, that thought process, that we had to limit the amount of people that can be in a space at one given time. We also used 6 feet of social distance markers to make sure when people walking through our building, they are constantly 6 feet in between another of our members. Another thing that you can recommend is that and we don't do it at our Y at this particular time, we don't have lobby space for our members to sit down. But if you do have a lobby place where your customers are sitting, that we did every other chair, like we do in our facility with our equipment machines. We marked off machines in this every other, just to try to practice social distancing in that way as well.
I'd also like to say from a cafe standpoint where the spacing might be limited, you may as a business may need to pivot your approach and your marketing as it relates to appeal for your clientele. So, utilizing technology, having times where they can pick up, their food, offering incentives for those who continue to patronize your business but can't physically sit inside, giving them, a free coffee with a purchase or something like that, where you would build the momentum and keep your business in the forefront, even though you can't manage the social distancing. It's the small things that really matter to your clientele, and knowing that you're putting their safety first, but we're giving you a good product. Come pick that up. Maybe if there's availabilities to have seating outside of your establishment along, a nice shaded area under a tree, just the appeal is what will bring the people back, and they would be able to deal with the social impact, but still support your business.
This is Chris Smith here with Jumpstart. I'll chime in on this in working with a lot of small businesses, and kind of piggyback off of the last comment that was mentioned. Last comment, speaking to the marketing aspect, making sure that you're communicating effectively to your customers. And so that they have a good understanding of the changes that you're making and how they can, help you out the business by abiding by those policies. I find is very important. The other part, incorporating technology that was mentioned, I feel like that's very big. I think a lot of small business owners are now becoming more aware of technologies that could benefit their business, which is a good thing. And managing what you can with your space. So doing an overall assessment of your business, the risks that may be in your workplace, and figuring out what you really can manage. But the technology piece I really like a lot. When I think about other entities borrowing best practices from them, for example, Chick-fil-A, you're able to pull up and they have workers out there, they're practicing good social distancing, contactless payments, but they're taking those orders ahead of time. And then they're moving you through a process that makes it easier to handle volume. So I think that's very important. I mean, you can implement practices like call ahead, order, and let us know, and then we'll go ahead and bring the order out to you. Those sort of things. But I think the communication, looking at different technology, those two aspects are very important pieces to managing that.
This is Jennifer with the First Suburbs Group.
Go ahead,
I would suggest, thanks, Jerome, maybe really hunkering down on that to-go business and offering folks an incentive to come back. If you've already had, one lunch to go, maybe offer a frequent shopper card or, a discount on an upcoming to-go order. If you're not comfortable reopening your seating space, really use that opportunity to market to beef up your to-go stuff. A lot of communities are finding that their small businesses are doing a booming to-go business, and take advantage of that. Make the most of that.
Thank you, Jennifer. We're going to move on to the next question. Very good insights, a lot of nuggets of wisdom there. McKinney Limited, I have a home-based consulting business. What may I require of my clients regarding social distancing and personal protective equipment? Who wants to take that question? I know all of us are confronted with those issues.
This is Kristine Adams. I'll just weigh in on a few things on this, and this is actually a really good HR question as well. Mm-hmm. When Mike DeWine made, when he kind of rolled back his stance on masks, and they did not become mandatory, and you're hearing across the country where masks are becoming mandatory in certain municipalities, and it is because the evidence is out there that it does really help reduce the spread. But as long as it's not mandated, like for example, we can mandate our employees at the Cleveland Clinic to wear masks. We cannot mandate our patients or visitors that are coming into our facilities to wear masks. But what you hope you appeal to is their sense of civic duty and not, the reason why we're asking you to do this is that so you don't get other people sick. You're in a hospital setting, and we don't want you to get sick. So I think from if you're your own company and you can make the rules, but in a lot of ways you are dictated by the local laws of your municipalities as well as your company policies.
Thank you, Chris.
From a municipality standpoint, again, to piggyback, our employees are asked to wear their masks. However, our constituents, our residents that are coming into the city hall that are not masked, we have the availabilities of the disposable masks, so that we are trying to emphasize, it's not just we're protecting ourselves from ourselves, we're protecting ourselves from you and you from me. And so if we have to meet with, a resident or someone of that nature and they do not have a mask, we would offer them the mask. And we haven't had any reservation in people taking masks and, being respectful to, what is going on. So from a business standpoint, a business owner standpoint, and a small business, if you have clientele that you need to meet with face-to-face, I would absolutely recommend that you ask them to wear a mask so that you are protecting yourself as well as them protecting themselves from you.
Hi, Jerome. This is John Grace from Jumpstart. To kind of piggyback off of what Nicole is stating, we've also asked, all of our team members to wear face guards and masks as they enter our facility. We sent out a communication memo to all of our external partners and the individuals in the community that we do close work with to let them know the expectations of entering our building. If they choose to set up meetings and things of that nature to engage with our team members and kind of what that process or the flow of that entrance and communication would look like so they're not caught off guard. We also have face masks, hand sanitizers, things of that nature available, to those individuals looking to enter our office if they did not come readily prepared, with a face mask. So once again, just trying to get everyone to buy into the fact that you're not just protecting yourself, but you're protecting all of those within this building, and encouraging that type of social distancing and so setting the expectation early has been what's helped us here at Jumpstart to really control the flow of PPE and how individuals interact with us within our office space.
Chris Smith here. I'll add one thing to that. When thinking about home-based businesses and doing consulting, assess the business and how you're consulting. Is it absolutely necessary to meet on certain aspects of what you're consulting with the client with, and just start thinking like, no, we can do this, via Zoom or Microsoft Teams meeting, or we can do email communications. Do we absolutely have to meet in person? And once you start identifying those things that you can just work on remotely and communicate via email or do video conferencing, you'll start to see how you're really streamlining your business itself and how you're interacting with your consultants. Interacting with your clients and still being able to deliver deliver value. It's a good opportunity to assess your business from a technology standpoint and really reevaluate your value proposition at that point in time, I think.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question. Dale Carnegie training. We're beginning to hold in-person classes again in July. We are not sure about requirements, masks, temperature check. What should we be doing to make sure everyone feels good about the experience? I think some of that has been asked and answered, but if anyone else want to chime in, please feel free to share your thoughts.
I would just say to that question, one of the great things about technology is that it is in real time, and all of these websites are very current and will give you all of the tools and resources that you would need to make sure that you adhere to what you need to do and to get the necessary requirements to meet the need. as it relates to feeling good about the experience, you want to just maintain the narrative that this is for, your health and the betterment of everyone around you. And that if you want to have, a productive class session or productive workflow, from a business standpoint, you have to make sure that everyone is doing what they're supposed to do, so that no one is sick and no one is, away from the job, no one can attend the class. So the feel good is to make sure that your health is good. And so if you keep that in the forefront, I think that everyone will be fine.
Yeah, and this is John Grace from Jumpstart. To tag off of what Nicole was stating, something that we utilized here for helping our team members to feel good were the utilization of surveys and what they would like to see, how they would like to be engaged and interacted with, what would make them feel safe. And then we've tried to put safety precautions in place based off of a lot of that feedback. It's helped us realize, in terms of capacity, how many people would truly be looking to be in person in the office versus being remote. And then that's really helped us with the social distancing efforts for those people who were going to be on premises to figure out exactly how we could construct the easiest flow for people to go in the building, out the building, to the restrooms, to certain facilities. So the survey has definitely helped us get a good perspective on how team members would like their safety to really be taken into consideration.
Thank you, John. I know Michael Carter, if he's on here, I know that at the YMCA, I went out and did tours of businesses in Warrensville Heights, and I was very impressed with the approach the YMCA took to address this issue and make sure that, their members are comfortable about their experience coming to the Y. Michael, can you shed some light on how you guys are doing your in-person classes and some of the approaches that you all are taking? I know about the green, yellow, red cones. Can you share that?
Yes. First and foremost, when our members, before we even brought our staff back, one of the things that we did was we video a tour of our facility, pointing out different areas, so our members as well as our staff had an idea of what to expect when they came back to our facility. Another protocol we're doing every 30 minutes. Our staff is constantly cleaning high-touch areas. When members are coming to our facility, we're not asking them to wear a face mask, but for our staff, we are taking a temperature check as well as having them to wear a mask. Another protocol that we put in place that you have to come in one way and you have to enter out another way. So we try to make sure there's no cross containment as you're going in and out of our facility. And I think I didn't hear this a lot, but I really reiterate that cleaning, and cleaning more. Engage your staff and making sure that they are cleaning on a regular basis. And members are actually seeing you disinfecting the equipment, especially the high-touch areas.
Okay, thank you.
Jerome, if I may, also from a municipality standpoint, to Michael's point, City Hall, we had companies come in and do deep cleaning in every building, so to make sure to ensure that our employees felt safe and that there was a clean environment for them to come to. We also emphasized, too, in our policy that at the beginning and the ending of each shift, that you would wipe down your surface areas, your doorknobs, your light fixtures. And we were very specific in detailing that so that there was no gray area. We talked about also, the lunchroom. We kind of roped that off. And now with the great weather, we are encouraging employees to go out and enjoy lunch and things like that, and no shared coffee. We have the Keurigs and, those small things which are imperative to a business to make sure that your employees know that we're all on the same team and we understand the importance of it. And we have to do this all the time on a daily basis and hold each other accountable. and just remind each other, when we're going in and out of those that have their own offices, we're not asking them to wear masks, but when they go out into the office, go into the hallways, go to the restrooms, go to the coffee machine, go to the copier, that you're wearing your face shield, you're wiping down the areas. So these daily practices, should become routine after a while, but we just have to keep reemphasizing the importance of it.
Thank you, Nicole. I'll move on to the next question. We have 3 more questions, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. Elvina Demark Tibbs, she's with Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Lambda Phi Omega chapter, Ski Phi. I'm an Alpha, so she knows what that means if no one else does. Question: how do we bolster consumer confidence that it is safe to patronize brick and mortar businesses? During the pandemic, consumers have become more comfortable using online services. Who would like to take that question?
So, I just add just one more time, being able to videotape your setup, your layout. Another thing that we have been doing for our members is, especially our seniors, is doing personal invites to show them the facility so they can get a firsthand look at what it have changed. And just trying to make sure that they is more comfortable of seeing the facility firsthand. And once again, going back to that cleaning protocol, what are we doing to protect our staff as well as protecting our members as they come through our doors? And yes, we all got a lot of our members that's doing online and trying to convert them to come back into the facility. It has been a challenge. But we have took those couple of things, trying to invite them back by doing personal invitation to the facility and doing online tours of the facility so they have an idea what it looked like.
And to be honest, Jerome, community is key. If our community supports each other and word of mouth and stating that the YMCA in Warrensville Heights, their staff is cleaning, we see them wiping down, the machines and the doorknobs, and they're making us feel comfortable. That is the best advertisement that you can do. So our community has to support each other. So we know that there's businesses in Warrensville that are doing what they're supposed to do and that they're adhering to the protocols. And so we need to support them. So, give them a shout out on your website or, go and take pictures. We're all attached to these phones. And so, just get the word out that these businesses are doing what they're supposed to do, and we need to support them in order to keep the doors open.
Thank you. I'll go to the next 2 questions. So Pastor Mike, a dear friend of ours, sent in this question. In smaller spaces with healthy employees, is it safe to run the AC? We have heard about restaurants spreading the virus via AC due to recirculation of contaminated air from an infected person. Further, what about running heat during the winter months if the virus is still with us then?
If you're okay with it, I'll take this. And actually, we had a faith-based webinar last week where we had this very discussion as well. It is actually a really valid and good question. Many of the fitness centers, there has been cases where in a fitness center in an enclosed area where the windows and doors are closed and the air conditioning and fans have been deployed, it certainly does. If one person is in that enclosed space, it does circulate to everybody quicker. Our recommendation and the CDC's recommendation is that you use as much fresh air as you can getting into the space, and that, we, of course, in the winter are going to need to heat. We just are going to need to do that, and in the dog days of August, we're going to need to cool down. But minimizing the use of fans that circulate internal air and increasing the use of fans and air conditioning that brings in external air into the space is certainly the way to go. Again, you're remembering too that while this is all happening, everybody is screening, cleaning, and distance in betweening. So everybody's wearing their masks. The place is clean, and they're 6 feet apart. So that's why you do all of these and all of these different things. But certainly in air conditioning, doors closed, windows closed, not an advisable practice until we know more at this time. Also, cleaning your filters, your furnace filters, is going to be key as we head into the colder months.
Thank you, Kristine. I figured you, as the subject matter expert, would have to tackle that one. Anyone else would like to provide any thought or comments? So I'm going to move on to the last question from the First Suburb Development Council, from Jennifer Kuzma. What is the most important aspect of getting ready to reopen? I know that we have covered a lot of nuggets of wisdom, and probably have exceeded the 6 known ways to safely reopen. But let's open that up and see if there's any other thoughts anyone else would like to share.
If I could just circle back to the onset of my presentation, is communication. You have to communicate with your staff at all times where you're at in the process, so that they are feeling and they are versed on their job and what their job is doing to make sure that they're protected, and understanding that, again, that we're all learning. No one has ever dealt with anything like this, to this impact, at this, this speed of change. No one has. And so we're all learning. But while we're learning, the things that we are getting out, the things that we are communicating, we have to make sure they're factual. We have to utilize technology and check the websites and make sure that we're not giving half information. It's just to communicate.
Thank you, Nicole.
I'll add one more, Jerome.
Sure.
Making sure your protocols meet your practice. Once again, making sure that whatever protocols you got, that you're practicing that and people actually can see that. And then another thing is that, because people normally would go back to what they used to. So constantly reminding why you're doing what you're doing and making sure that everyone's staying within protocol. Members and staff tends to go back to what they're accustomed to. And so with this new norm, you just got to constantly be visit and in front of people and making sure that you are enforcing your protocols.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else? Well, what I would like to do now is I want to go ahead and thank Nicole, McKinney-Johnson, and Kristine Adams, and all of our thought leaders, from Jumpstart to the Urban League of Greater Cleveland, Northeast Ohio First Suburb Development Council, to the YMCA of Warrensville Heights. At this time, what we'd like to do is we actually have about 15 more minutes. I actually wanted to open it up to all of our participants to be able to continue this roundtable discussion and dialogue, to see if there are any other questions that you may have that we can present to anyone on the call. I also like to give a shout out to Horizon Inc., Bob Miller, who reached out to our office when we were scrounging around trying to find PPE equipment early on, and he made available as one of our manufacturing companies in the city. His company was making face shields for first responders and made that available to the city. Also, the Cuyahoga County Office of Emergency Management also provided PPE equipment, face covering, as well as other equipment to support the first responders, as well as the city. So, I always like to say that, it's an African verb that us, them, they, we're all in this together. And so let's go ahead and open it up to see if there's any other questions from the audience. If you can go ahead and unmute your mic, we'll entertain any further questions. Thank you.
Jerome, I know we had a couple questions in our chat. And the first one was, how do you overcome resistance to change?
That's a very good question. We know that change is constant, and it's how we adapt and deal with change. But one of the things that we have learned through this process is communicate early and communicate often. And I think Nicole continued to echo that during her presentation. But let's go ahead and open that up to anyone on the call. Okay. So again, it's I think that as you help to guide people through the process and making sure that people have what I call the three C's, communicate clearly, concisely, and make sure it's consistent. I think that that is a model that helps people become more comfortable with change. People are resistant to change when they don't know what that means to them personally and how that impacts their day-to-day operations, either within their business or within the things that they normally have to do. And so the more we can communicate with someone about what that change is and what that change means, hopefully through that, what I call guided discovery process, people are more apt to adapt to that change.
If I may, Mr. Duvall.
Yes, Chief, how are you?
Okay, I just want to add to that a little bit, because what you say is communicate often is definitely effective with that. We have daily roll calls, and we make sure that we understand that there's change going to be implemented daily, especially with this unprecedented pandemic going on. So if you understand the fact right up front that there's going to be different changes in protocol, and understanding that it may change daily up front, that's another key, and that's how we have to do it, by communicating often. So you're dead right on that, and I just wanted to say what the fire department and how we do that. We always make sure roll call is implemented with the daily changes that we may have and updates.
Thank you, Chief.
We do have someone with their hand up, and I did get another question from the chat. So
let's go to John.
Okay.
I think his hand is up.
All right. Hello, panel. I just wanted to know, considering there are cases of, double-digit positive testings coming back, are any of you starting to engage or prepare your teams to start thinking about, what needs to happen if there is another shutdown?
From the municipality standpoint, we have considered that and have had talks as it relates to what are the next steps in the event that the ticks go up. One of the great things that we do have in place is that we do have policy as relates to our telecommuting. We have the policy relating to best practices and safeguarding ourselves. So it is not, it won't be a deer in headlight like it was before. We're pretty much going to circle back continuing to check the CDC and the county as it relates to our numbers, keeping a intensive pulse on our employees and making sure that they're safe and they're okay. But yes, to your point, we have talked about it. We do know that it may be something that we need to consider moving forward, and we have some practices and protocols in place in the event that it does happen.
Thank you, Nicole.
Another question we had from the chat. There's two that I want to get to, but the earlier one we had came up during the screening, cleaning, and social distance in betweening slide. Was, will this, cut down on the flu and regular colds that we see? As I'm assuming, doing all of this stuff, will it affect then those numbers as well?
Well, we absolutely hope so. And the other thing I would add to that is really advocating getting your flu shot, because we're going to have to tease out what is the flu, and make no mistake about it, influenza can be just as dangerous, particularly to our elderly population, as COVID. We see a fair amount of deaths, although not as many as we have seen with the COVID population. So we're hoping screening, cleaning, and distance in betweening also reduces those, because what we're trying to prevent is a high hospital census of flu and COVID cases. If we become overwhelmed as a healthcare system, and I'm not just talking about Cleveland Clinic, I'm talking about University Metro, the greater Cleveland area, it reduces our capacity to be able to care for patients, and thus it increases our mortality rates. So if we can keep beds open and manage these patients, we'll be in good shape. The other thing, in addition, we did see last year a very mild flu season, which was good because, we saw a pretty robust flu season. We're not anticipating it to be that intense this year. So again, that's giving us a little bit of wiggle room as our bed capacity potentially may be stressed. Hopefully that answered.
Yes. Our next question from the chat was, can you explain the 50% rule? Any possibility of going into a phase 3 this year?
I don't know specifically what the 50% rule is. Kristine, I don't know if that's something that you've heard. Chris, if you want to unmute and explain in greater detail your question.
Well, we heard that, they wanted people to come back to work, but maybe only bring 50% of the people back, maybe keep some working remote. And that's what I just wanted to get somebody's opinion on that. We have so much room in our office here at Warrensville that hasn't been an issue. We don't have a close contact issue, but I was just curious.
From an HR standpoint, there's been some data from the larger corporations, your Progressives, some Cleveland Clinic, that they are still adhering to AT&T. They're still adhering to telecommuting because they're learning that people are being more productive and they feel more safe if they are able to telecommute as opposed to coming in. And then from a logistical standpoint, corporations are now going to have to, if there's a cubicle, they're going to have to do every other cubicle. So they have to think of different ways in order to make sure that their staff comes back supported and safe. So there have been surveys that have been sent out. Even Eaton has sent surveys out to their employees asking them, would you want to come back if we do A, B, and C? Or would you feel more comfortable, productive, available via Zoom, however you need to do that, if you decide to telecommute. So the communication is going out. Some companies have already said that their employees are not coming back. The majority of their employees are not coming back until the end of the year. So there's a lot of components, a lot of variables. It's really contingent on the leadership and what they know that they can produce in a fast amount of time and ensure safety for their employees.
Thank you, Nicole. Let's go ahead to the last question, and then we want to be respectful of everyone's time, where time right now is 11:24. So we have about 6 more minutes. I do want to give a few minutes to yield to Mayor Saylor, who has been leading this team through this pandemic, and have him share some of his insight thoughts. Joanna, what's the last question?
I think I got to all of the questions from the chat. So if there was anybody else who had one more question.
You know, excellent. I do have one more question, if that's all right. And I think maybe it's going to be going back to the question from Cafe Avalon. And while we addressed his question with, I think the answers came more from the customer standpoint, and I'm not real sure if he's in the room today and can add to it. But my first thought was from his employee standpoint, where I know that building and I know how tight it is, and for him that means sometimes am I in business or not in business? If the space is so tight behind the scenes in the kitchen, and I think we see that in a lot of businesses that serve us, that like grocery stores, maybe not so much, but kitchens maybe is a good example, where you're either working close to each other or you're out of business. And I wonder if any of the folks, the experts here, can either words of encouragement. I'm sure he doesn't want to hear close down, but I think we really sometimes have to look at those people and support them in some particular way, because I know how challenging that has to be for them.
Thank you, Steve. I know that someone, I think Chris from Jumpstart talked a lot about the online services and e-commerce, which small businesses have had to be very creative and think outside the box and really explore how to best do takeout orders and how to do online payments and set up merchants accounts. That is, I know, because Avalon does fish fries, and they do a very good job at their service as a service provider in the restaurant industry. And so that's one of the things we're starting to see more of. I know that it's definitely challenging when you're dealing with a confined space, especially when we talk about air circulation and making sure you keep that back door open, make sure there's some flow of air in and out of that space. And I've been to Cafe Avalon several times. And so I totally understand the challenge there. And so hopefully today you've walked away with probably more than 6 ways to safely reopen, but I want to make sure that everyone has a minimum of 6 ways of things that they can quickly go back to their employer or company and implement based on some of the information that was shared today. I want to pause for a second. Was there a comment?
I was just going to say, Jerome, I'm just going to circle back and say that because we are, members of the chamber and we are community, so we are available if they have any questions, they want to have a conversation. I'm available, to walk you through it and kind of see it from outside of, your specific area, and maybe, provide some resource or some clarity so that you can see it from a different perspective. Because when you're in it, sometimes you feel overwhelmed and you don't see, the forest for the trees. But if you have someone else that understands and can give you some other perspective, it's very imperative. So, we're a family, we're a community, and we're here for each other. So I think that should be the mantra for us all.
Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate it. And from the chamber standpoint, even though I probably wouldn't have the answers, I'm sure that I could direct questions to the right person. So thanks, Nicole. I appreciate that.
Steve, at this time, I'm going to open it up to Mayor Sellers if he's still on the call, if he wants to say a few words. And then I'm going to thank our presenters, thank our thought leaders who have joined this in this roundtable discussion. Back to you, Steve.
So, Jerome, let me say thank you for leading the discussion today, and I want to thank all our panelists. I want to especially thank Kristine and Nicole for their precise information, and all our other presenters from John and Jennifer and Chris who have all weighed in on various aspects. But I would just say this. I just want to say one thing is that I think the sharing of information is what is key here. And you don't have to know all the answers, but you got to know where to ask and when to ask. And I would tell you from our city's perspective, we've leaned heavily on South Point Hospital, the Clinton Clinic, and their leadership to guide us on a number of issues. And then we're all learning together, because I think this is a time where you may not know the answer, but it is one thing that there are other people out here experiencing the same items that you may be experiencing. And the other thing you have to stay really flexible, because it seems to change on a almost daily basis about the more and more we find out about this disease and virus, the more and more adaptable we have to become. And so until we get to the point where there is a vaccine available and being deployed throughout this entire world, not just this country, we're going to stay flexible. And so that means in your work environments, you're going to stay flexible. And I understand that we have to be able to deliver the products that we deliver to our constituency all the time. So the one thing is that I've learned, if I don't know, I'm not afraid to ask somebody who may know. And then I'm not afraid to make the necessary changes on a dime to see if that's going to get me to the next point. So just stay fluid in what you're doing, and just know that it's going to come to an end at some point. And the one thing, to Steve's point, I do want to say this: we have to rely on businesses here in this community, if we can, to help us through. Those that need glass surrounds around desks and workstations, there's a company here called Castle Glass in Warrensville that we're leaning on to make those. We've relied on a number of our construction companies here to understand exactly what heights those need to be at. The cleaning supplies, there are a number of communities in this area that can help you with the disinfectant supply chain as well. The masks are necessary, right? I see, as we look at this every day, the rest of the world is getting to the point where we are, where we know the masks are going to be necessary. It really should not be an option. But I think we're trending that way, as I see more and more parts of this country encounter the problem at a different level. So the flexibility is key. Stay flexible and just know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve?
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to again thank everybody. Thank Jerome. Thank you, Mayor, for those words. Thanks for the panel, those contributors. It's important stuff. Our health comes first. Otherwise, what's the point? With our businesses. So thank you again, everybody. Appreciate it.